Welcome to WTF, Ways to Freedom podcast show, where we explore all areas that bring freedom in state of mind, body, and spirit. Sit back, open your mind, and take a journey with your host, Mwe Ishangi.
Blessings, y'all. Greetings, greetings, greetings. We are here another night, a Wednesday evening, May 8th. Giving thanks for you all for tuning in. I've been really excited about tonight's show. Tonight, we're going to be talking about who is the Boulé. And this is one of my favorite topics historically. This is actually stemming from, reach over and get my book, a book I wrote that came out in 2018. This virtual stuff I'm not doing any justice, but I have pictures, I have slides and whatnot, so we'll get to that. But nonetheless, trying to work on this virtual stuff. So, hopefully it's a little better. We got a little bit of lighting, but, we're in production. We're working on this stuff. So giving thanks for everyone coming in, tuning in. We'll let people come in if you want. Welcoming you. Again, my name is Mwe Ishangi. I am a financial therapist, and also I teach STEAM, and also I'm a cultural curator. I'm really big on the whole notion of us knowing who we are, so that we can know where we come from, so that we can then have an idea of where we're going. Okay, so tonight's show is going to be really, really interesting. If you tuned in last night's show, which was our first episode, we talked about how our life has been designed to be mediocre, and we had a very fruitful conversation. It was engaging. The chat room was lit. We got a lot of responses from folk. Even post replay, folks are watching. So I'm really, really happy about that. Me stepping into this arena, having this is something new to me. But I've always wanted to do it, and it's like, if not you, who? Then if not now, when? So it's really about going ahead and doing it. And I'm feeling like I'm already getting adjusted to these things, the platforms, the software, etc. Even the virtual backgrounds that you're seeing, still working on it, but getting there. Hope you can see too that we have, I gotta get my fingers right. So this is a little ad banner that I'll be having on each show, where I'll be showcasing either the topic for the evening, some products that I have, and also for those that have product, if you're looking for signage, if you're looking for a space to have your piece on here, that is also available. So feel free to inbox me if you have any requests of that nature too, because I'm all about trying to spread the word to our folks about what we're doing entrepreneurially, and also as far as getting information out to our people about the different things that we do diasporically. So yeah, last night's show was pretty dope. Really enjoyed it. Really got into some deep conversations about the educational system and how basically we have been programmed to be docile. A lot of stuff that we learn in school isn't really applied in real life by design. It's to create the worker bee mentality. So if you haven't checked that episode, feel free to go back. Just go back to the homepage here, and you will see that it is up there, and you can watch it. And we again welcome any feedback and interest. For those that are coming in, feel free to come through. I welcome you to go ahead and engage. The chat line is open. Let me know where you're hailing from, where you're logging in from, what city and state. And again, we're going to get this thing going. As I start, the reason why I'm doing this particular piece is because May is actually Boulé History Month. And if you're not familiar with Boulé, aka Sigma Pi Phi, you're going to get a whole robust meal of it this evening. And May, when you have an anniversary such as this is an elite organization that's founded in May 15, 1904. They're actually having their 120th anniversary on the 15th of this month. But every May 1st to the 31st, they have to actually rededicate themselves to their commitment to the tenets of what the Boulé is all about, which we'll talk about. They have to do that every year. They have to reread the history book. Now imagine that. You're part of an organization and you could have been there a member for 5 years, 20 years, 30 years, or whatever. But no matter how long you've been a member, for the month of May, you are to reread the history book in its entirety so that you are refocused, rededicated, and staying on par of what this organization was founded for and by. And we're going to talk about that this evening. I say that's important because this is America's first Black fraternity. And it goes beyond the step shows. It goes beyond what we hear about on HBCU or PWU campuses and whatnot. It's more than that. It's actually elite men who are in places of, let's just say, vanguards to our progress collectively. They've had a say over throughout the history timeline on how the snail-pace progress that we've had. When you find out who's sitting at, if not driving, because they drive the Miss Daisy, and Miss Daisy is the advisor, or they are sitting co-pilot and actually front line to go ahead and keep the tenets of global white dependency in place. Right. So it's important that we know that, because everything that was founded by Black people isn't always good for us. And when we find out that those things that aren't necessarily good for us, we find that those organizations are actually being controlled by other folks. Okay. So before we get started, I have one request, as I want to start with every show, and I'll be saying it throughout, to help me grow this channel, to help me reach more folk. I do hope that you will, as you come in, just go ahead and like it. It doesn't cost you nothing. Just go ahead and like the video. I assure you this evening you will get your reasoning as to why you liked it. I look to share some great information with you, but just to get that out the way so that you can already have it done and you ain't got to worry about coming back. Please feel free to just go ahead and like the video. If you are not part of the subscription on YouTube, please go to YouTube and subscribe to the channel so that you will receive notifications of when next episodes come out. And just to give you an schedule idea, we are airing every Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so, the duration depends on how dope the topic is and how deep we get into and how engaging it is. So, I would say at least in the ballparks of at least 45 minutes. But last night we went just over 2 hours. So who knows? Tonight we might be around that area too. But I hope that it's for your enjoyment, at least for your educational enlightenment. Sister Amit, good to see you again. You were here last night. Appreciate you all the engagement. See you here hailing from Atlanta, Georgia. Again, go ahead and get in the chat. Let's get engaged, y'all. Let's tell me where you're hailing from and whatnot, so that we can get this community tribe going. So as with each show I'll be doing also is when I start out is I like to go over what this show is about. Okay. The tenets of this show. So I'm just going to go over here and look through my notes here to make sure that I'm on point. Each show we will cover 6 themes, or one of the 6 themes, rather. I'm sorry. Finances. We'll cover spirituality, health, history, STEAM, and philosophy. All right. So I want to be well-rounded. We are well-rounded people anyway. We didn't go to college to go get 1 degree. We knew 360 degrees of knowledge. So I like to cover a lot of topics that are relative to our well-being. This is all about getting ways to freedom, right? So in those cases, we find out that, there's some people that have been in the way, let's just say, right? And this is where we talk about not only the culprits behind who's been delaying this or trying to shield this or even hide this from us, but then also to be in a space where we are creating venues to reclaim, to get back to where we were, right? So that we can create better futures for ourselves, especially for our bloodlines, right? So those are the 6 things that we will cover every episode. Excuse me, let me just clear my throat. That happens. All right. Okay. So tonight's, in addition to the 6 things, I do need to make a preface of is that this show is based upon the 10 areas of people activity. We talked about that in depth yesterday in yesterday's podcast. But the 10 areas of people activity is basically a black print, I like to call it, instead of blueprint, to how global white dependency, and again, I call it dependency because they need us to enforce these things to stay in power, not supreme at all. They just basically have convinced us that we need them instead of doing it ourselves. So they're dependent upon our ignorance. So those 10 areas that they have basically, and I'm talking about elitist, and this is just white families, you know what I'm saying? Probably at the top tier it is, but they also know, all other ethnicities know, if we can keep the black people on the bottom, then, we can continue to eat off of them, right? So I will include all ethnicities. I'm sorry. It's just, that's what it really is. I'm pulling from the hip. I'm not pulling any punches, right? So the 10 areas that we talk about are areas that are governed by these entities and how they maintain power and control. And simply knowing these 10 areas, if we decided to dissect and study these areas ourselves and then take upon these areas to adjust them from our perspective, that'll benefit us, guess what? There'd be some competition. There'd be a situation where that power that they so-called have would be relinquished, or it would definitely subside. So those 10 areas are economics, education, entertainment, health, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Okay. And when you look up think about those areas, you got to think about who's in control of those areas. Who's in control of our economics? It's basically white folks. Who's in control of our education? We talked about that yesterday, John Rockefeller and James Dunn. We talked about, the education department. So we talked about that. We talked about health, Bill Gates, etc., Monsanto, all these companies owned by white folk. Labor, law, politics, war, these are led by mainly elitist white families, and they all have no loyalty to any border. Okay, if you know anything about the Rothschilds family, the Rothschilds family is the world's leading banking dynastic family, and they have jurisdiction in even sometimes battling countries. Okay, if you look up the war of, I think it was 1812, where we had Napoleon losing the war, the Napoleonic Wars, and how he was losing the war. Well, it was Rothschilds that came in and created the banking dynasty simply by letting the British think that they were losing the war to the French, and come to find out that the French, when Rothschilds, who was then in banking, let folks know, hey, we're losing the war, I'm going to sell all my goods, or I'm going to sell all my stocks. Because people followed him like E.F. Hutton, they all followed suit and sold all their stocks. Well, they turned around and came back and said, oh, my bad, we're actually kicking the French's ass, we're winning. So now everybody's like, oh, damn, I sold my stock, let me go buy it back. Well, while he convinced everyone that they were losing and everybody sold their stocks, what did Rothschilds do? He went and bought all the stocks himself. So now when folks were ready to come back and buy the stocks back, they had to buy it from him. And of course, he raised the price. So that's how the dynastic family of Rothschilds happened. So my point is that they are the head of these things. The way things are in life didn't just happen. There was someone that decided we were going to step up. And I hate to say this, but to a degree, I can tip my hat off because they saw an opportunity and took advantage of it, even though no matter how inhumane it is, we see that they are in position because of strategy. They are in position because of timing, because of ruthlessness. You know what I'm saying? So we have to understand that this is the world that we're living in. And if we want to have any kind of say, and it doesn't have to mean that we have to be world powers, or I just want you to let me live my life. You know what I'm saying? This is really about, when it comes down to it, just me life and you leaving me alone. Now we know that they can't do that. But the point is that means that the more of us that have the power to come together and try to create something that will collectively get them off our backs, right? So that's what this is all about. All right, so that's the preface. So tonight's show, let me just read the summary of what we're going to talk about tonight, right? So May is Boulé History Month, where over 5,000 of the world's elite Black men recommit themselves to the mission of continuing to be the Black version of Skull and Bone at Yale University. Why is this important? When we take a look at the history of Black America's political and socioeconomic success, we find that only success has been for a select few. These few are members of the first Black fraternity, Sigma Pi Phi, aka the Boulé, which translates to advisors to the king. I will be discussing my fifth book, Who's the Boulé? The History of America's First Black Fraternity, in detail, so you'll get a clear understanding why progress for us has continued to stay at a snail-like pace for over 120 years since emancipation. So that's what tonight is going to be about. All right. So let's get into it. Let's really get into it. So I have a slides. I'm always about showing visuals because, you know, it's important that we show things because it kind of helps things to stick. Right. So here we're going to pull up my first one. I'll really get into what Sigma Pi Phi is all about, why it was founded, the actual atmosphere for it, and how important it is for us to be aware of why this organization was founded. All right. Let me see. Let's give it a little bigger. There we go. All right. So, so this is the book that I wrote, came out in 2018, called Who's the Boulé? The History of America's First Black Fraternity and the Derailment Towards African Self-Reliance, right? Yes, African self-reliance. There's things that people have been trying to stop us from liberating ourselves, right? And again, wow. We're going to get into a little bit of everything tonight. So, you know, please take notes if you need to, or obviously, you know, rewind and, you know, you can come back and visit the replay. All right. So the Boulé, we're getting into it. So I got to tell you about who I am. I got to tell you about, I just can't come up here and just say, hey, you know, I know what I'm talking about, but I never experienced it. So I actually was part of a fraternity from 1991 to 1996. Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. I pledged across December of 1991, Omicron chapter, University of Pittsburgh. And, you know, that's my picture of me up in the upper right corner there with the arrow pointing. So we was online and whatnot, holding our names and whatnot. And, you know, I don't really have any, I have a few of bad situations being in the fraternity. And we're not gonna talk about that tonight, but I do. Overall, this is not about bashing fraternities as far as members, fraternity members. So if anyone is watching this and you are in a BGLO, a Black Greek Letter organization, I really do hope that you can remove the emotion from this. I'm not personally attacking you. And you, what is my organization? This is my frat, this is my sorority. Yeah, I get that. But this was founded before you even thought. So I'm really going back to the origin of who decided to create these organizations, the reasons why, and the effects that it's had on us as free people in this country particularly. All right. So this is, again, please try to remove that, you know, because if not, it's going to block you being able to dissect this information. All right. So I was a member, again, from 91 to 96, and I was that dude. I loved Alpha. Everyone on campus knew I loved Alpha. I had to wait till my junior year to pledge because the chapter wasn't there. It got expelled. And so a few brothers of mine that became my line brothers, we petitioned to get the fraternity back on campus for 2 years. I came here as a freshman wanting to be an Alpha because I was exposed to it by my uncle at the age of 14 or 13. No, actually I was 11. And that was because it was the first time I saw Black men. I wasn't raised by my father. So it was the first time I saw Black men in suits doing something. And I was like, I want to be that. I don't know what they are, who they are. And then my uncle told me later on he was a part of it. So I knew I wanted to be an Alpha. Came to the University of Pittsburgh ready to pledge. I even showed up at the first union party, you know, the first part of the year, doing steps, not realizing, dude, you can get your ass kicked. But I was like, okay, I want them to know I want to be in the frat, right? So, of course, they didn't take that too kindly, but they also put me to the side and said, okay, you had your chance, you know. But the chapter wasn't there, so we fought to get it back. Had to go through graduate chapter via nationals, and then we got the chapter back. I will tell you that during that era, fraternities, they were cracking down on, because of hazing, they were cracking down on pledging. So graduate chapters were stepping in to do 48-hour initiations, right? So you could get your letters in 48 hours. And we was like, that's not cool. We want to pledge. We want to pledge. We want to get, who says this? I want to get beat up. I want to earn my letters, right? But there's a thing called, paper members, and then there's people that are skating. They didn't really pledge. They just got the letters over a 48-hour period, so they don't get the respect. So, we decided, well, the only way we can get these letters is we have to go through graduate chapter, go through the 48-hour process. Then after that, then we will go to the underground, the brothers that were still in the city, and they will pledge us for 6 weeks. All right. So we did that. I'm not going to get too much into my experience. I'll talk about that at another time because it's really not about, I'll have an actual episode we're going to talk about to be or not to be Greek, and we'll talk about that then. All right. But just to put this out there, let me move out myself the way here. So there's nothing new in the world except the history you do not know. Harry Truman said this. And it's really important because, again, for those of us, we're whatever ages we're in, and we think that we know enough, we still don't know enough. And so the whole goal here is to be open to things we don't know, right? And then what you know, try to be accountable. Decide what you want to do with that information. Do you want to keep it? Do you want to roll with it? Do you want to refute it? Refute it. You can do that, okay? But the point is that a lot of us are have habits or part of groups and organizations and don't fully know how or why or even who founded these organizations and for what reasons. And that's because we haven't done a historical analysis timeline about what was going on in that era. Why did they create these organizations, right? So I realized even when I was exposed to the Boulé in 1996 by ancestor Steve Coakley, big up Steve Coakley. He's known as the Boulé Buster. He's the one that exposed him in 1990. In 1996, I went down to a lecture in West Virginia University and saw him do a talk. And again, I was Mr. Alpha. I was step show headmaster. I was, the guy. I'm not saying I was the guy, but people knew I loved my old gold and black, right? And so I go down to see him do a lecture, and he literally just shook my whole foundation. And so I had to actually have an emotional grappling about something that I loved Alpha. I loved being a member. I saw some of the symbols. I thought that they were African in origin, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But then I realized, oh, wait a minute, this was actually a facade. And if I am trying to be African-centered, then I can't ride the fence. It would be oxymoronic for me to consider myself African-centered and also part of a BGLO. Now, for anyone else, that's your decision. But for me, I realized that I didn't want to do both. I couldn't do both. Right? So it was important for me to change that up and make sure that I, switch things up here. Okay. So trying to get this thing to change here. Here we go. All right. Let's go. All right. So we go to the next phase here. This is a shout out to, again, Ancestor Steve Coakley, who transitioned in 2012. Ancestor Steve Coakley was, again, a rebel. He revolutionized the whole information about what the Boulé is about. Today we have people accusing everybody as being in the Boulé. You know what I mean? Even though they haven't done their research. No, LeBron is not in the Boulé. Not these entertainers are not in the Boulé. They're prerequisites. You have to be in a fraternity first. You have to be part of. You have to either be an Alpha, a Q, a Kappa, or Sigma, and maybe Iota. I don't know, but they were part of the Divine Original Nine. But the point is that Steve Coakley dedicated his latter years of his life in exposing folks to what the Boulé was about, because we weren't aware of what we were dealing with. We're thinking we fighting white folks, and that's our enemy. We kind of find out we had some house niggas in front of us. I'm sorry, ninjas. We had some house ninjas in front of us that were actually, and it was sublime because we didn't realize it. We didn't understand how did these Black organizations get infiltrated? How did the Black Panther movement get infiltrated? How did Nation of Islam get infiltrated? How did, Martin Luther King's civil rights movement get infiltrated by our own folk? Okay, because there were puppeteers behind those infiltrators that were giving them instruction to give information to us. All right, so that's where we see the origin of our organizations, is that although it says for Black people, and they might even put out that it was founded by Black people, but in all essence, it's not really for Black people, it's for white people to keep Black people in check. Because again, we got to think about this. 1904, when it was founded, is just 40 years removed from slavery, from emancipation. So how do white folks go from being able to control you physically to now trying to maintain that control? Can't do it physically, but it's even better mentally. You got to get organizations. You got these organizations that come off as Black, but in actuality, they're being ran by white folk. All right. So that's what we're seeing. All right. So big up to ancestor Steve Coakley, who were naming the names, and he's the Boulé Buster King. So with that said, I'm always about bringing stats to things, kind of make some sense here of what we're dealing with. So these numbers not. Come on. I don't know why this thing's not. Okay, I'm trying to shift up on my. All right. Shift 8. Why are these keyboards? There we go. Gosh. Now I'm going to keep flipping through a whole bunch of different things. All right, sorry, y'all. So how do we get here? In 1865, there were 50 million Poatas, or people of African descent in the United States, roughly again 13%. We talked about that yesterday, how we hover around the 12 to 13%. We've been doing that since 120 years. So we're not really growing. We're not growing at all. We're dying, and that's not really good. We need to really think about why that is. And there's a plethora of things, and they all fit under the 10 areas of people activity. Educationally, 10% or 5 million are college or postgraduates in education. In economics, the median household income is $41,000. The U.S. average for everyone else is $75K. So there's an economic disparity still there. Our wealth is 10 times less wealthy than whites, and the gap is widening. Okay. Our loans are 2 times more likely denied for mortgages, 20%, whereas whites is 8.8%. And deaths were 4 times more likely than whites to be killed by police. All right. So these are just the real facts of what we're dealing with. Now, this is important because we have to figure out how, there was, again, things happening. It just happened that way. Someone's came together and decided, this is what we're going to do. This is going to be the plight of the Black experience in America. So there's a guy by the name of Arnold Toynbee who came out with a series of books. Again, we talked about yesterday how these historians came out and started changing the narrative and making it seem like whites were more supreme and that Blacks didn't do nothing. Well, here's one of the guys. He wrote a book called A Study of History, and a quote that he put out, this book out in 1934, he said, when we classify mankind by color, the only one of the primary race that has not made a creative contribution to any of our 21 civilizations is the Black race. Now think about how damning that is. Think about how damning that is. If someone puts that in writing and then puts it through the educational system from the collegiate levels all the way down to public school, and of course it gets dumbed down. But the point is that if you think about this, and it was done, I mean, whether we read it or it just wasn't included, if you don't see yourself, then you feel like it didn't happen. So when we think about, again, our educational experience, how often did we hear about great civilizations? Mali, how did we hear about Kemet? We never heard about these places. We heard all about Europe and maybe even a little bit of Asia. We heard about all the wars and, the French and all that stuff, but we never really heard about Black people and their contributions. And when we do, we know what we hear about slavery, right? So, it's not a coincidence that we're seeing that these are the type of experiences that were programmed. And you had folks that would sit here and put these things out because they wanted people to have a narrative about ourselves that then we would inherit and then interpret it and carry it out ourselves. The value of ourselves will be lessened, right? So this is what's really happening here, is that they're already staging making a stage for us to see ourselves as less than. And they want the rest of the world to see us that way as well. So we have people coming out with these books, these volumes of books. And he read, I can't remember how many volumes it was, but it was a series of thick ass books about history of everyone else. And they said he had the audacity to say that we didn't contribute anything. The only one that has not made a creative contribution when everything they learned came from us. The Nile Valley Mystery Schools, all their inventions, everything, the innovations, the tech industrialization of everything, learned it from us, okay? So Asa Hilliard, historian Asa Hilliard, ancestor as well, said it's very important, and this is what really shifted me, because when we were in school and we do even some historical timelines, sometimes we never thought about, well, where were Black people? What were we doing around that time? So he came out with letting folks know, look, it's important to study history, but you must do it in chronological order. You need to have a date. And then when you have that date and you see what's going on, also look at that time, where were Black people? What were Black people doing? And when you do that, then you can find out what it is that they've hidden from us, okay? So that's the key, is doing that historical analysis. But again, as we talked about yesterday, is that white folks decided we were going to make sure that we were the champions of our knowledge. We were the ones that were the vanguards, and we were the greatest race ever created, right? So let me just plug this in real quick. So their whole thing was, Winston Churchill said this: history will be kind to us, for I intend to write it. I do not admit, for instance, that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or the Black people of Australia. I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, and a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place. So he's not really wrong. I mean, it's diabolical. But the point he's saying is that, we came over and took shit over, and y'all couldn't beat us. So, I ain't got no sympathy for that. All right. So the way they did things, we know, was diabolical. I mean, we talk about, smallpox, and the Pilgrims putting smallpox in their blankets. That's what caused a lot of the Native Americans to transition and get sick. So they did things diabolically, but the point is that their whole thing was about force and taking it by force. Okay, and now putting it in the record books to let people know, hey, we back, right? Y'all can't do nothing about it. So it's important to understand this, though, is that there were people that were understanding the importance of letting us know that history is there for us, that some of us did do the work. And one of those folks we must all pay homage to. I consistently pay homage to this brother, George D.M. James. George D.M. James, who wrote the book Stolen Legacy, came out in 1954. If you have not read this book, please put it on your list. Audiobook these days too. If you can't be a page turner, go ahead and get the audiobook, and go ahead and read that book. You know what I'm saying? Because it's really important when we understand how Greek philosophy, Greek history is actually stolen African history. That's the synopsis of his book. He was able to pinpoint that everything that we see going on in the world has an African origin, and they just choose not to give us the credit, right? We talk about the pillage of Alexander the Not So Great around 332 BC. Up to 400,000 Kemetic papyrus scrolls were stolen and given to the plagiarizing Greeks to create the Library of Alexandria. So when someone comes in to, take over a country, they go after their intelligence. They go to their libraries, and they take that information and they use that period to dissect it. So from 525 AD, Justinian I ordered the closing of the last Kemetic temple. And it wasn't until 1,300 years later that they were able to read the Meta Neter. So think about that. They come in, start, pillaging, created a Library of Alexandria from a period of 525 to roughly 1800, early 1900s. You couldn't get access to this information. And the only people that could were the ones that were trying to devise ways that they can control the world, the way the situations are right now. Because the period we're in right now is really what's been the next wave was started around the early 1900s. Okay, so once they were able to interpret the Metal Neter, it ushered in an era of darkness until 1822 when the Rosetta Stone was deciphered. So this now enabled them to go back and learn about what Kemet was about and all those writings on the wall, those glyphs of Metal Neter. What were they doing? Because our ancestors knew they weren't just graffitiing like, who set this was. You know what I'm saying? They were letting people know the knowledge was on the wall because they understood that stone can withstand time. So they couldn't put it in necessarily a book. You know, what happens to a book? A book can be weathered over the years, water damage, etc. The ink could, run over whatever, or run through the paper. These are situations where they realized that information can't be stored in books. So they wrote them on the walls. And so once that language was interpreted so they could read it, now we started to see that there was this newfound information about our story, and then they could apply it for themselves, right? So then we started the emphasis of the Great White Lie. The Great White Lie came onto the set when we started seeing now that white folks were now starting to organize. Because now that you have this information, now we want to put it into play. And how can we put it into play? We need to basically put it into an organized system. We need to make it systemic. In order to make it systemic, we talked about the educational system yesterday. We talked about those 10 areas, the health system. They had to put it in these systemic ways. Well, who are these folks? Because it's one thing to say they, but if I told you, yo, they shot your moms, you're going to want to ask, well, who is they? You keep saying they. Give me a name, right? I need a name because I don't know who to go after. I don't know who they is, right? So we're going to talk about some of those names tonight. First, we can find really interesting when you study history, you do it in chronological order. On May 1st, 1776 is a very important date. May 1st, 1776, we had two things happen around the world. The Illuminati was founded. Now, I know people have heard the term Illuminati, and it's been cliched, so people don't really put a lot of emphasis on it because rappers are talking about it and everybody's Illuminati, whatever, right? We haven't done the studying of what the Illuminati is really about, but nevertheless, it is a thing. People think about the Illuminati and they think about Hollywood and all the stuff that Cat Williams been talking about and all that, and it's bigger and much deeper than that, much deeper than that, right? But anyway, in Bavarian Germany, May 1st, 1776, the Illuminati was created, right? It was created. Interestingly enough, across the shore. Now, this is in 1776, so we didn't have no telephone, we didn't have the internet. So simultaneously, the same date, we saw that 50 of the 56 signers of the American Constitution were actually present to sign the Luciferian doctrine. The Luciferian doctrine, the root word is Lucifer. So they basically decided that they were going to make a pledge to Lucifer on the same date that the Illuminati, which is also a satanic organization, created their chapter. There's no such thing as coincidences, as Brother Steve Copley would say. All right. And then just over 2 months later, they come back on July 4th and they do the Declaration of Independence for America. So the founding fathers of this country, before they created America as we know it, on May 1st, they pledged their lives to Lucifer. Okay, it's just something that we should be aware of. So there we see the hijacking now of the history of our story. Dr. Nana Jonathan Clark said that Europeans have claimed the African creation of Egypt in order to downgrade the position of African people in world history. They have laid the foundation of what they call Western civilization on a structure that the Western mind did not create. So we're seeing the hijacking of our story, y'all. This is the hijacking of our story. So with that said, it's important to know that our story, there's a difference between our story and his story. His story is his version. historian takes our story, takes the things out, whitewashes it, changes it into another color, and then he puts out his version to make it seem like they're the ones, right? Good example of that is the father of Greek history, the Greek father of history, Herodotus, who lived from 44 to 425 BC, let folks know the true complexion of the people of the Nile Valley. He said that they were burnt skin, flat nose, thick lipped, and woolly haired. Okay, so he let you know back in 400 BC, that before Christian era, that everybody in this area looked like probably a lot of people that are online listening tonight. Okay, all right. So that's very important. That's very important for us to know, because when you, instead of me saying that we were black and the people in Egypt originally were black, when you have some of the earliest people, again, from a chronological point, can verify that this actually happened. They actually verified that, yes, we were there years ago, that there were black people there. That's confirmation. It's very important for us to understand that. Socrates also 470 to 399 BC, and Plato 428 to 347. This stuff is really bugging tonight. Everything is delayed. I'm sorry that these things keep popping up, but their works can be traced to Kemet's mystery system, the mystery schools stored in the Library of Alexandria by Alexander the Not So Great. So a lot of the Greek philosophers, your Plato, Socrates, etc. Aristotle allegedly wrote 1,000 books on 1,000 different topics. Come on, that's impossible to do in one lifetime. But again, some of those folks didn't actually say that they did these things. It was later on, once they passed, the Greeks were saying, well, let's just say that Aristotle was this and Socrates was that, and Pythagoras made the theorem, etc. A lot of them were on their deathbed letting people know, look, this information we got from Kemet. We went to Egypt and saw what this was and learned it there. In fact, if it wasn't for Egypt, we wouldn't know what we know. Right. So one real important point I want to share with you all that was really important, and it really drove home to me when I learned about this from my Jegna, Anthony Browder, is that John D. Rockefeller, man, this dude had his hands in everything. Everything. I mean, and there's people activity, this guy, right? Early 1900s. And so there was this push, because in 1899, Napoleon got to Egypt. They saw the Sphinx, or really called Hera Maquette, and saw that it was an African face with African features, big nose, thick lips, etc. And instead of respecting what it was as a relic and those behind it, he had his army line up and shoot 21 cannonballs to the nose and lips to deface it. They went all throughout the Nile Valley doing that. That's why it's very hard to find any relics or statues that have us with the face not being tampered with, because they didn't want you to see how thick the nose was and the lips were, because then you would you would know that they were black people. But all you gotta do is go behind some of the statues, if you get a chance to, and look at the hair. You can see locks, braids, etc. So that was us. But anyway, there was this push because Egypt was now a thing, and white folks was like, oh, we gotta learn about what this stuff's about. So we need to go down there and we need to find a white presence there, because we need to let people know that this is our territory. You can't let people know that black people, the people that, we just freed from slavery 40 years ago, we can't let them know that this is, where they come from. We not got to let them think that they were still jungle bunnies, right? So they actually created organizations. So there was a historian, George Reisner, who went to Kemet and saw the pyramids, or the Mir, M-I-R, and because pyramid means flat pancake and has nothing to do with nothing. That's what white folks do. They take something black, they rename it, hoping that you won't find a definition. But luckily, the root, you can never turn a weed into a rose, and you can put as much cement on the road as you want. A blade of grass is always going to shoot through, and that blade of grass being truth. So anyway, he actually went there and said, no way Africans developed Sudan in Egypt. No way. They didn't build this stuff. They didn't build this huge relic Hera Maquette. They didn't make these tombs. They didn't have electricity, all this kind of stuff. They were like, there's no way that this happened, and we're not going to allow it. So we're going to try to find a white presence. So then in comes James Henry Breasted. In 1912, he came out with a book called Ancient Times, and he described as well Just like, what was it, Herodotus that I said that did it before? Let me get my names right. Yeah, Herodotus had said before that they were black people in Kemet in 400 BC. In 1912, in his book, he says that the Egyptians or described Egyptians as dark-skinned people, unlike the Nubian and Aswan. So he's telling you, yeah, these are black people in Egypt, all right? So Rockefeller in 1919 hooks up with him and says, look, we got to change that. So we need to go down there and find a white presence. I'm going to fund you $1 million, and I want you to go down there and try to dig, keep digging, and find what you can find. And we need to make sure that there's, we need to find a white presence there because it could be black people. We have to dispute that, okay? So 20 years, well, about 13 years later, after doing these digs, the deeper they dug, the darker people got, okay? So they weren't ever able to find a white presence. Now, mind you, again, this is early 1900s, so yeah, we might have a phone. I believe we do have electricity, but we don't have the internet. And so whenever you were learning things, it was based upon what you're exposed to in school. So it was in your textbooks, right? So in those textbooks were, how often were they updated? So they were in control of the knowledge. So they could keep this on the hush, not let anybody know that we couldn't find a white presence. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change what we've been putting out there. So Breasted then changes his book in 1932 from calling people of Egypt dark-skinned people, unlike the Nubian of Aswan, to now saying they are dark-skinned Caucasians. And the Nile Valley is where the great white race lived. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? 13 years later, he changes his book and says they're dark-skinned Caucasians. There's no such thing as a dark-skinned Caucasian. And then he says this is where the great white race lived. So the emphasis is that if you want to rule, you must control the information. And at that time they could, because there was no internet. None of us had passports to go there and go and see for ourselves. You know what I mean? So everything we relied on was whatever they fed us. Okay, so that's why they were effective in keeping this lie. So as I talked about the importance of timelines, this is why I'm showing you this, is because timelines are very, very important. Very, very, very important when trying to understand what we're dealing with here, right? So in this timeline, we're seeing 1776, the Luciferian conspiracy we talked about, founded the Illuminati. They're also American version of the Illuminati was Phi Beta Kappa, the first American fraternity. In 1784, we had the Prince Hall Masons. In 1832, we had the second chapter of the Illuminati, Skull and Bones, founded at Yale University, 1832. Right? Let me see some. Sister Amit was saying, I just want to show this real quick because I definitely want people that have something to say to give them a say here. I love pairing etymology with the hieroglyphic dictionary to get original meanings for words we have in our culture. Absolutely. Yes, it is. We need to study. Everything has an origin. Everything has an origin. All right. So with that said, 1865, the Emancipation Proclamation, right? The Emancipation Proclamation comes through, right? And we're seeing that now we are freed from physical bondage, but now they got to figure out what they can do with us. They got to get us mentally, all right? 1868, the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks of America was founded. This is a Black organization as well, all right? I'm sorry, no. That's not Black. I think it is, actually. 1884, the Berlin Conference happened. And the Berlin Conference is when they started to dissect Africa amongst white people. So the Berlin Conference is something you should really look into because that's when they decided, hey, you got white folks that's going to show up into your house and say, hey, I'm taking a bedroom. You can have a kitchen. You can have a garage. You can have a living room. Like they just moved in and set up shop, right? And decided they want to share it and exploit it for themselves. In 1899, we see Napoleon invades Kemet, and from there we see the growing interest in the study of Kemet, and then also the hiding of the story of those true inhabitants, making sure that we were multicultural now. They even went down there and changed some of the paintings, colored some of the features white or lighter skin, because they wanted people to think that they were at least multicultural, but you see very little Black people. But when you go to the museums and you see the artifacts, you see the carvings that are in the walls or the statues that are handheld or even life-size, and you look at those features, you see they're Black people, right? So now we come into the emancipated African, and we have Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity, founded in 1904. Okay, see that, founded in 1904, and then we see the beginning of Black organizations coming from there. Right? What do we see happening? We see Alpha Phi Alpha, 1906, and up until 1996, I thought Alpha was the first fraternity. Didn't know that Sigma Pi Phi was the first one. 1908, Alpha Kappa Alpha, the first sorority. 1909, the NAACP. Joel Spingarn, who was a Jewish spy, who we had the Spingarn Medal. We'll talk about it in a minute. The anti-lynching bill, we'll talk about that as well. 1911, the Urban League, Kappa Alpha Psi, and Omega Psi Phi founded that year. Fraternities, 1913, Delta Sigma Theta sorority founded, 1914, Phi Beta Sigma, 1920, Zeta Phi Beta, 1922, Sigma Gamma Rho, 1938, Jack and Jill of America Foundation. This is where they are actually recruiting from kids to become groomed up into the fraternal system, the fraternal order. And then we have 1944, the United Negro College Fund. All right. So we're seeing that these have origins. And it's important for you to understand that, because when we understand that everything has an origin, then it allows you to now connect the dots. And then you can start to see who's behind it. Right. So the family tree is very important to look at here. And as I mentioned, we had the Illuminati founded. The American version of the Illuminati was the first chapter, Phi Beta Kappa, founded on the same day, May 1st, 1776, by Adam Weishaupt. Today, Phi Beta Kappa is an honor society because in 1776, their cover was blown. And back then, you know, Americans weren't having it within these secret societies. They were not down with that. So their cover got blown December 5th, in 1776. So they actually went underground, basically, shut things down, and didn't show up again until 1832 as Skull and Bones at Yale University, as the second chapter of the Illuminati, Skull and Bones. Okay. Then we see that the trust portion, because this is incorporated, these were not just, you know, a group meeting on Saturdays and just hanging out. They were enterprise, they were entities, and they were very serious about it. So they were, you know, bringing all the legalese jargon, the financial piece, the educational, again, 10 areas of people activity. They were serious about what they were doing to set up, establish this systemic way of control. Okay. So they had to do these things, and they did it in chronological order with people like the names of Adam Weishaupt, Mary Ansel Rothschild, Cecil Rhodes, which we'll talk about as well, John Rockefeller. Okay. Some of these are born men, some of them are made men. Like when we talk about the mafia, Italian mafia, if you're a born man, you were born into it. If you're a made man, someone who's already in it anoints you as being a member. You know, the born men are your Adam Weishaupts, Rothschilds, and Rhodes. Rockefeller was a made man, and he didn't like that. He wanted to actually be a born man. So that's why he was trying to prove his worthiness by doing so much, right? But the preface to all this is because why am I talking about this? You know, Neely Fuller, who was one of the co-founders of the 10 Areas of People Activity, said that if you don't understand white supremacy, racism, everything you do understand will only confuse you. So this really is a mind, excuse me, I'm just going to say it. This is a mind fuck, because we have been told that we were not allowed, we were never perceived to think that we could think for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So the point is that you have folks that even amongst our ranks and our families and our friends, and we talk about stuff like this, man, you talking about that deep stuff, and it ain't all that, it ain't that deep, blah, 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 blah. And that's because it's intimidating and it's also confusing. Yeah, because it's hard to realize you've been lied to, and you've been lied to the majority of your life. So of course, there's some rebellion to that, because no one wants to admit that they've been lied to. At the same time, you're very angry, and then you also feel abandoned, because now what do I do? What do I believe in? You know, because now all of a sudden your whole infrastructure has been taken from you. But it's important to do this, because if we don't, it bleeds into the next generation. We are where we are because our parents didn't know, and they were where they were because their parents didn't know. Do we continue that cycle moving forward that our children won't know because we decided not to know? If that continues, they continue to win. Okay. So this is all based upon a global conquest of Africa, not just the land, yes, very much so, but also the people. So when we talk about the Berlin Conference in 1884, it was really about taking over the land, not just because of the land itself, but because of what was there. When we look at what was there was so profound. I mean, we're looking at colonial Africa as, you know, all of these things. When they broke it up, you see who was owning what. You know, the French had this light blue. This is what the French owned. You know, you have the independent states in the blue. You have the Portuguese owning the orange. You know, the Belgians had the gray. And in these areas, they had natural resources. Okay, so when we look about the gold and the diamonds, we see that in the coffee and grains. Well, we see that over here, we're looking at the English colonies. We're looking at the independent colonies, and also we see the Italian colonies taking over those areas. Crude oil was by the Portuguese. So when they had the Berlin Conference, they already knew what was there. They said, we're going to divvy this up. We're just going to take everything we want for ourselves. And it's interesting when you think about that, because you think about a place like Switzerland, and, you know, Switzerland is kind of known for its chocolate, right? You know, Swiss Miss, etc., right? Everybody thinks that chocolate grows in Switzerland, and it doesn't. It's too cold. So where are they getting the cacao from? They're getting it from Africa. They're getting it from the Caribbean. But they wouldn't dare call it that in Switzerland, right? It gives you the perception. And Swiss Miss has the audacity to even make their chocolate white, because they want to give you the perception that, you know, chocolate is white because of the white people, right? We look at vanilla. I mean, vanilla, the flavor, we talk about vanilla, the vanilla bean is black. So when did it turn white? When white folks got their hand on it. Something that tastes so good can't be black. They already got chocolate. Can we get one? Right? So they figured we're going to make vanilla be white, right? So again, this is just understanding how serious they take the viewership of being white, okay? This is a guy that we should know about, Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes is very important to know about, because this guy was all about trying to colonize, as it was said. He wanted to colonize Africa from Cape Town to Cairo. And this is the image that was used of him. You can see, is it put in a paper, and news magazines rather. And you can see his foot in South Africa going all the way up to Cairo. He wanted to create a railroad line. He was unsuccessful in doing so, but nevertheless, he was most known for having diamond mines. And his diamond mines still are mining diamonds today. He has several different mining companies, and one of the companies called De Beers Mining Company. You might have remembered the commercial that comes on of it's a silhouette of a man and a woman, and they're hugging each other, and they're playing these violins. Dun, 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 dun. That's De Beers. De Beers Mining Company is owned by Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes would have Africans combing the land on all fours. In most cases, you would be naked doing so that you couldn't hide a diamond anywhere, because the diamonds are literally on the ground. That's how robust they were. So he would have you crawling on the ground and picking up the diamonds and putting it into a vase around your neck. So you pick one up, put it in the vase. We couldn't put it anywhere else, right? And because you're naked, you can't hide it anywhere. But he also was a pedophile. Cecil Rhodes used to take young African boys, and he would throw them over a cliff after sodomizing them, because he didn't want to do the same boy twice. This is what white men did to our children. After having them working over all that time, then they would feel like they could just go ahead and do away with them and throw them over a cliff. So, you know, this is really important. Sister Ahmed says that I'm trying to figure out how long they thought they could keep us asleep to all of this. Facts. You know what I mean? Because you can't, I mean, at least maybe for their lifetime, but, you know, the truth always comes to light, as they always say, right? So anyway, with Cecil Rhodes, with all of his inhumane doings, they still glorify this guy, South Africa. And one time, Zimbabwe was named after him, Rhodesia. Used to be called Rhodesia, named after Cecil Rhodes. You even have in America, they honor him. Remember, well, I've said this, I didn't say it on here before, but I've said plenty of times in my talks with folks is that there's a lot of power in the word sound power. When you say a word, whether it be a name somewhere or not, it gives it power. It allows it to stay strong. It gives it energy, right? So when you think about word sound power, and when you say Cecil Rhodes, or when you say Columbus, you say Columbus Circle in New York City, they name these places and these streets and these cities and these buildings and these, technology or whatever you're naming them after these people, you're continuing the legacy of their memory. So when we talk about Rhodes Scholar is the alleged highest level of education, academic achievement one can have. And it's named after this criminal, this pedophile, this thief, this murderer. Okay. And America should be ashamed because one of its states of the 50 states is called what? Rhode Island, named after Cecil Rhodes. So the point is that, we have to understand the origin. They're not looking to do us any good. All right. Just understand that. You talk about America, the land of the free, home of the brave. Yeah, it's for them. All right. We just happen to be here. So he once said, Cecil Rhodes said, we happen to be the best people in the world with the highest ideals of decency and justice and liberty and peace. And the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for humanity. So think about what this guy is saying, y'all. Think about what he's saying. He's saying that we're the most decent people on the planet. And the more y'all that bow down to us, meaning the more of the world that we inhabit meaning the more we take over, it's going to be better for y'all. I mean, it's crazy, yo, how the caucasity, as I said yesterday, the Caucasian audacity of white folk to think that they could say these things and convince the world, which they've done. They've convinced the world to step aside, let them do what they want. And it wasn't so much about an ask, it was by force. But then they turn around and want to write in the books as though, oh, this is just for the goodness of humanity, right? Straight up bull. Right? So we have Phi Beta Kappa, again, the first, Sigma, Skull and Bones. And we had to create a black version because remember, 1865, we were emancipated. So now we were no longer having to stay on the plantation picking cotton. We could roam the streets. Of course, they created the police for that. If you don't understand the history of the police, 5-0, they were founded. They were basically the overseers. And Karis wanted a song back in the day, Son of the Police, overseer, officer, overseer. They are synonymous that, they were founded to patrol and monitor and agitate Black people. Okay. So with that said, even in this newfound freedom of physical enslavement, we were now allowed to educate and read. And if we read, that means, oh man, we could find ourselves, right? So they had to control what materials we could get access to. And again, there was no internet. So any book you read was published by a publishing house. And if this publishing house is white, then of course they didn't include us in the story. And if they did, it was negative. So they were able to control the type of information that we had access to. So with that said, we see that we have the creation of the need for creation of a Black version to keep us in check. You had to have another Sambo. Now, some people say Uncle Tom, and I wrote an article a long time about that. Uncle Tom was actually not, and that's unfortunate because Uncle Tom should get his flowers. Uncle Tom was actually he's a real man who actually fought for and defended our people on the plantation. Okay, he was the one that stepped in and would take the hits when someone was coming to give lashings to a child or a mother. Uncle Tom was the one that was standing up for us. But again, we've been told that he was a sellout. Well, the real sellout was Sambo. Okay, so let's get that correct. Whenever someone says Uncle Tom, just tell him, hey, I ain't trying to debate, but do me a favor, do some research on who Uncle Tom really was, and then counter that with crossing him with Sambo, the story of Sambo. So I see the Boulé as a Sambo organization because you had to have someone that was going to steer Black people away from Africa and into the Americanized white perspective of what the Black experience should be, orchestrated and carried out by white folks. They actually sat here and cultured how the Black experience should be here, and then they sold it to us, and we bought it. Okay, so the Boulé is part of that. So with that said, the main character behind it was Henry Menton. I'm going to play this clip of him so that you can get just a deep synopsis of who he is and what he was about. All right.
Philadelphia.
His career is very distinguished. He accomplished a lot. Education-wise, he was a pharmacist, he was a medical doctor, and he attended University of Pennsylvania Law School for 1 year before he started to follow his passion in medicine. But he accomplished a lot. He also founded Mercer Hospital in Philadelphia. It was the second African-American hospital. He was the superintendent of that hospital and the director of medicine of that hospital.
Menton also had the idea for an African-American Greek letter fraternity. So, in May 1904, he and 5 others founded the first of its kind, the Sigma Pi Phi fraternity.
Sigma Pi Phi fraternity is the oldest African-American Greek letter fraternity in the nation. Again, it's founded in 1904. And it's comprised of a who's who list of very distinguished African-American males. Some of the past members of African-American history who have deceased included Martin Luther King, W.E.B. Du Bois. Some of the current living well-distinguished African-American include people like Colin Powell, Eric Holder.
With a membership that exceeds 5,000, Sigma Pi Phi continues the legacy of Menton and his co-founders today, providing scholarships for young African Americans around the country.
Okay. So that gives you a kind of an idea of who he is. Now, again, that's the polite version that they want you to know about, right? They're not going to tell you what he was really about. I'm remiss to mention that I did not mention earlier, too, is that if you get a chance, again, we're talking about tonight, why did I write this book? Who is the Boulé? So we're going into what the Boulé is about. If you do like this topic, please, in the least, go ahead and like this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, so that you'll receive notifications of when we air materials. We do air every Tuesday through Thursday for the foreseeable future, and I just want you to be abreast of that. And if you also find what you've heard so far, compelling, that you want to contribute something, a donation, definitely welcome it. You can send it to either Cash App at Bitmarley. You can also to my PayPal at paypal.me/DGTYMZ. Okay, so appreciate that. So let's get back into what we're talking about getting into Henry Menton. Now, Menton, again, that video you saw is the one that he's this great guy, he's an academic guy, it was all about our people and scholarships and academia and all that stuff, right? Because again, we think education is the key, right? It is the key, but we think that the education that they want us to get, again, we talked about it yesterday, it's going to make you mediocre. It's going to make you a worker bee. You can go ahead and get all these, certificates and whatnot, certifications rather, but then, after you have all these degrees, you still need somebody to give you a job. So they robbed us of the ability to be entrepreneurial or to take what we've learned in these spaces, maybe manage your experience and network with people, and maybe you could do some things collectively. Just received a Cash App donation from Jessica Moore, giving thanks. Appreciate you so much, sister. Give thanks. So, the point is that we have to think about how we can contribute, or how white folks have created this mindset that Black people aren't anything without us. So they needed to have a black face do it. You can't have a white person saying, you need us, because a lot of us are like, no, we know what y'all did to us. We had enough of y'all. So we needed a black face to come out there, right? So Henry Minton was that guy. And he, in his own words, because remember I mentioned every May, all members, there's 5,000 members of the Boulé, they all have to reread the history book. So they're all reading this as we speak this month. Every day they're reading this history book, going through it, rededicating it, getting refamiliar with the tenets of, and tenets meaning the basis of why they were founded. So Minton said that he wanted to create an organization which would partake, in his own words, of the tenets of Skull and Bones at Yale and Phi Beta Kappa. You got a black man in 1900s that says he wants to create a black organization that's going to be based upon a white organization that has a history of suppressing black people. Now, when I say that, people are like, oh, what? Nah, it is. You think about it. He said that he wants the tenets is the basis. The tenets is what are the foundational principles of this organization. So if you know anything about Skull and Bones, which we'll talk about in a second, the point is that you got a black man that wants to create a black version of it. So we want to do the black people, what the black people is what he's saying. Plain words, black words. Right. We have to understand what's going on here. So when we talk about the family tree now, is getting bigger now, right? Remember we had Phi Beta Kappa first, and then we had the second chapter of the Illuminati, Skull and Bones, and then they created their child, which was Sigma Pi Phi in 1904, right? Now, here to go be fruitful and multiply, we got to get black people to buy into this thing, right? And Sigma Pi Phi is not an undergrad nor graduate chapter. You're not going to hear about the Boulé. Now, if you're in a sorority, you might hear about the Boulé because it's their biannual conference meetings that they have. That's not the Boulé that this is about. The Boulé is an actual fraternity incorporated May 15, 1904 again, and out of Philadelphia. So they needed to create as a professional fraternity. To be a member, you have to be at least 45 years old. So you're out of school. You should already be accomplished. They're not looking for people with potential. You've already achieved things. That's how you become a member. And you're groomed over time. So Sigma Pi Phi realized that we needed to create a filtering system where we could bring people up through the ranks, right? So they created these sororities and fraternities, right? And also other organizations. So what do we have here? From Sigma Pi Phi, again, we talked about the eight. They call it Divine Nine. The Divine Nine actually is the 4 fraternity and 4 sororities plus the Boulé itself. Okay, so you can see the years. Again, it's important to look at these years: 1904, 1906, 1911, 1911, 1911, 1914. Sororities founded in 1906 between 1906 and 1922. We also find that the other offspring to the right here is HBCUs. In 1865 to 1900, we see a bunch of HBCUs being created. We also see in 1909, the NAACP being created, the Urban League in 1910. We see Jack and Jill in 1938, and we also see the United Negro College Fund in 1944. So this is the family tree that we see that is being created that is going to help global white dependency keep its foot on our necks. All right. So again, studying history in chronological order, if you're a researcher, you want to find out not just the name of the organization, but who founded it? Who are these people behind it, right? So I did and it's all in my book, I did a deep research on the people involved and who their connections were, from HBCUs all the way down to, again, the United Negro College Fund, and again, fraternities and sororities, right? And these are some things that I really found. Interestingly enough here, when we look at the NAACP, really interesting thing, again, founded, 1919? 1909. The National Association for the Advancement of Certain People say colored, but I say certain because they've only been helping certain people. Most people think that the NAACP was founded by Ida B. Wells and W.B. Du Bois. Actually, they were founded by Jewish spies Stephen Wise, Jane Addams, and Joel Spingarn. Joel Spingarn was in military intelligence, and these were the three Jewish white folks that founded the NAACP and put Ida and WB as the face, because Ida and WB were actually creating the Niagara movement. That was their organization. They relinquished that to create the NAACP. Okay, so they were creating their own thing and decided, let's get with these white folks, and they funded it, whatever reasons they did it. But I do know they were groomed. Actually, W.B. Du Bois was of the James Dunning School. He was one of their best astute students. So just as we talked about William Dunning yesterday, W.B. Du Bois was one of his pupils. So one of the most notorious things that we don't know about the NAACP is the arrangement they had with the U.S. government from 1910 to 1959. If you look up the anti-lynching bill, the anti-lynching bill was petitioned in 1910, right? In 1910, okay? Let me see this, people. Is the family tree in the book? Oh, I'm sorry. Someone asked, is the family tree in your book? Yes, it is. It's in the book. Yes. The anti-lynching bill was petitioned in 1910. It didn't get passed until 49 years later, y'all. 49 years. It took 49 years for them to stop, for the NAACP to get the government to stop hanging African people. 1959 is when it became an official bill, right? Now, why did it take so long? That should have been done with the day it was put in, right? So why did it take so long? Because there was an arrangement. There was an arrangement, y'all. The arrangement was, for that period, the NAACP had to report intelligence to the government of any doings of Black people that would be considered a threat. Now think about that. The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, supposedly, is set up to be here to help Black people fight against racism. And with that said, they are in exchange telling on the people that are trying to plan something to stop people from hurting them, white folks from hurting them. So if a Black person comes to the NAACP and say, hey, we're trying to organize a meeting, a group or whatever to battle this situation here in this state or this jurisdiction or what have you, and we're meeting on here and we need your help, they show up, they come to the meeting, they gather the intelligence, and then they go and report it to the government or the local police or whoever else they reported to. They did that for 49 years. 49 years, y'all. And then after so much, so let's think about this. Who was involved in what type of progress did we have during those times of 1910 to 1959? Marcus Garvey, right? We could talk about Martin Luther King. We could talk about, Malcolm X. We could talk about Patrice Lumumba. We could talk about Stephen Biko. We could talk about the Black Panther movement. Well, that was in the 70s, but early 60s or late 60s. But the point is, on the 70s. But the point is that you have this very same organization that's supposed to be here for you. They're saying, come to us, we're going to help you, blah, blah, blah. We're going to help you fight injustices and such. And they still allegedly are here to do that. But what are they really doing still? They're actually giving the person an awareness of what's happening. And that's really damning to us, as Brother Scholar Rock says. It's damning to us because we were literally going to the person we thought was going to save us, and they were actually the person that was telling on us. They were snitching on us. Any progress that we were trying to do, any movements, any names, they probably given names, numbers, addresses for 50 years, giving this information to the man or the Wizard of Oz. I'll say he ain't a man, to control us. Right? That's right, the ultimate snitch. So this is what we're dealing with here. The Crisis magazine was also one of their publications, and this was edited by Du Bois, and it rivaled Marcus Garvey's The Negro World publication. Every member of the Boulé must have a lifetime membership with the NAACP. So that's telling you again right there, look, if you're going to be a member of the Boulé, you also have to be a member of the NAACP. So what does that mean? If the NAACP has a history of snitching on his own people, and you're a member of it, then obviously you're doing the same thing. All right? But the Boulé, as Du Bois had said once, was quoted as saying, the Boulé was created to keep the Black professional away from the ranks of Marcus Garvey. They wanted to make sure that Black people would not think for themselves. The NAACP has 2,200 chapters in 50 states and 4 foreign countries and 500,000 members. Okay, so that's a lot of snitching going on, right? And Joel Spingarn, again, they have the capacity to every year give out the Spingarn Medal. The NAACP gives an honor, the Spingarn Medal, every year. And when you look up the history, and I have it inside the book of the recent members, winners, and most of the winners of the Spingarn Medal are also in the Boulé. So they're doing the utmost. They're doing the best snitching that the NAACP can offer, the Boulé. Okay? Just connecting dots here, y'all. Just connecting dots. HBCUs, the talented 10th in HBCUs, right? We talk about the talented 10th and how, you know, the ones that go to college are considered the talented 10th, the best of our best, right? And, you know, HBCUs actually were not founded by Black folks. The first HBCU, though, was Tuskegee University, founded by Booker T. Washington, right? And they got him out of there. And he was taken over by R.R. Moten, who's also in the Boulé. And under his watch, we found the Tuskegee experiment happened on his watch. A Boulé member knew what was happening. He was at the head orchestrating it. Booker T had already transitioned, so he wasn't there. But with HBCUs, we find that it was funded by Julius Rosenwald and John Rockefeller. Here we go again, John Rockefeller. Why does John Rockefeller want to find HBCUs, y'all? Why is he so interested in Black people? Not because he likes us, because he want to control us. So Rosenwald and Rock get together, create the Push Foundation in 1922, and became breeding grounds for people of African descent who sought life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness via education. Thought if I go to HBCU, I'm going to have a Black experience. It's Black teachers, it's blah, 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 blah. You know, it's all Black, 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 Black. But it's actually founded by and orchestrated and ran by and funded by white folk. So they're going to make sure what we want you to learn and what we don't want you to learn. Okay. The Talented 10th made the rivals to Tuskegee Institute. They created HBCUs because they didn't want to have any more Tuskegees. Tuskegee was created by a Black man for Black people, and they didn't want any more of that. So they created a plethora of different HBCUs so that it would swallow up and drown out Tuskegee. And when they got rid of Booker T, they didn't have to worry about that anymore because they put in one of their own, R.R. Moten, to run Tuskegee. Right? So we find that our most prestigious HBCUs, like the sisters that go to Spelman, they don't even realize that Spelman is actually named after John D. Rockefeller's wife, Laura Spelman Rockefeller. You know what I'm saying? So it's just really interesting how we just don't know. And we don't think to know because our educational systems have taught us, don't go out and search on your own. Let us give you a curriculum of life. Don't learn. You're only going to learn what we want you to know. You're never going to be inquisitive of wanting to find out on your own. That's just not how you're programmed. We've programmed you to sit there and take whatever I give you, and you feeling like that is enough for you to know what you need to know. That's the unfortunate part of quote unquote education, because education, the root word is educere, and educere means to bring from within. But our stuff is coming from without. It's coming from somebody else out there that is rather, you know, controlling every mindset and every tactical decision we've made individually, collectively, culturally, spiritually, morally has been dictated by Europeans. Go back and watch yesterday's episode, Why We've Been Designed to Be Mediocre. This is the manifestation of that. And I'm sick to my stomach too, sister. You know what I mean? So let's proceed. So we find, as I talked about this before, that the Crisis magazine was one thing. Du Bois was the Du Bois, whatever you want to call it. He was the person that he was the face for the white folks to go after everybody black, right? And he wasn't this pit bull. He wasn't this, he wasn't knocking people out. He was just this philosopher, and he was well renowned and known, so people would listen to him when he said things. So he rivaled Booker T, and then he also then rivaled. He didn't like, when I say rival, meaning he didn't like him. He didn't like Marcus Garvey either. They had public, and these things are collected in articles where they would call each other out. W.B. Du Bois called him a very intelligent man, but he has a very big head. He looks like a gorilla. Black men calling another black man a gorilla for the whole world to know about. This is from a person that went to the University of not Cambridge. He went to Oxford. Okay, this is a well-educated man that's having these street beefs like Drake and Kendrick because he wants to, be the top dog, right? Meanwhile, all of his closest friends were white, by the way. A Pan-African, they say in the end. He died in the end as a Pan-African. Yeah, he died a Pan-African. He went over there to create the Encyclopedia Africana. And funny enough, that shortly after that, Nkrumah gets a coup on Nkrumah, and the African Encyclopedia gets hijacked by the Boulé. Henry Louis Gates is the editor and author of it now, and he's been controlling the information in there. But again, I'm digressing. It's a lot of stuff. All this is intertwined. There's a lot of information that just comes spilling out. But anyway, so they rivaled each other. Well, he was fighting back basically to Booker T and also Garvey. So let's talk about these universities, and we find who the founders are. Again, all this stuff is in my book, Who is the Boulé? Shaw University, founded in 1865 by Henry Martin Tupper. Fisk was founded by Clinton Bauer Fisk. Henry Lyman Morehouse, this is the guy you see here next to W.B. Du Bois. He's the one that W.B. Du Bois stole the phrase talented 10th from. Henry Lyman Morehouse is the one who came up with the title or the moniker of the talented 10th. He knew, let me get these Negroes to think that they're the best of the best, and I'm controlling what you're learning. Okay, so it's just really interesting for us to understand, Gerard said, reminiscent of Ali screaming on Fraser, absolute, right? And Sister Melanie says, necro is Latin for dead corpse. Yeah, exactly. Tissue, negro, right? So, we got a lot of ninjas or niggas, and that's what we want to call them. I hate to say the NIGG word, but I'll say ninjas. But the point is that, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of dead-minded thinking people out here that are afraid to reawaken their spirit and just face these things. Look at the history so that we can stop what's been happening to us generationally. But we see, again, getting back to this list of the universities here, Howard University, founded by Oliver Otis Howard. Atlanta University, founded by Davis Walcott Clark. Meharry Medical College, State University, Clark University, Davis Walcott Clark. Spelman, again, founded by Harriet E. Giles and Sophia P. Packard, but named after John D. Rockefeller's wife, Laura Spelman. Okay. So these are some of the universities that are HBCUs that, people that, I had the HBCU experience. Yeah, that's cool and whatnot. You went to a school with a bunch of black people, but it's really a PWU, a public white institution, or PWI rather, founded by white folks. It's just that it's portrayed as an experience for black people. But when you go to these HBCUs, and I didn't go, I went to a PWI, but I've also known they're severely underfunded. Deion Sanders exposed that when he was coaching at Jackson State. facilities, dorms, and all that stuff. They didn't have running water sometimes, so the funding is terrible. The experience may be great, but the living conditions aren't. But the point I'm making is when you know your roots, you know that this is important, why we should know about what happened before. And when we know who we are as a collective, then we know the culprits behind it and the things that they're trying to portray us as being less than or non-contributive, as Arnold Toynbee said, that we didn't contribute anything to the world, right, of all 21 civilizations. Let me continue here. I say I'm gonna have to part two this thing because this is really, we're already an hour and a half. I didn't realize it was this long. But I showed this yesterday that Napoleon Bonaparte, they said the history is the lie agreed upon. We talked about his reasoning on thinking that, his goal was to control and stamp out Black people, especially in Haiti, because if he did it in Haiti, that would be a significant starting point to delaying the progress of Black people around the world. Okay. Carter G. Woodson, who said, if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. When you do determine that a man shall think, you do not have a concern of yourself, concern yourself about that, he will do. I'm sorry. You do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to tell him this. And he will seek it himself. If you make him think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there's no back door, his very nature will demand one. Very, very profound words from a brother who was also in the Boulé. Again, this is a they conversation. Remember I told you about the days when they talk about, oh, they shot your mom? Carter G. Woodson was in the Boulé. And he rebelled because they had him doing work with Carnegie, and they didn't really mix well. So he was ousted out of the Boulé eventually, and so was Du Bois, but it was way too late. But the thing is, once they got out, they still did not. They did the one thing: they didn't tell you anything about who these people are, and whatever hints they gave you, like in here in his book, Miseducation of the Negro. Throughout the book, he's giving you hints of there being organizations and folks that are, behind closed doors keeping us in this place, but not once did they tell you the names. So what did that mean? All those secrets died with them. How selfish. And how that's delayed, again, as I mentioned in the title of my book, the delayed derailment of the progress of Black people. Because you had people that knew the information that then decided, you know what, I'm going to keep it to myself. Now, for whatever reason, probably death threats. I didn't mention that I got on George D.M. James. I forgot I got a point on George D.M. James. The thing about him that I cannot give any more accolades to. When George D.M. James wrote the book Stolen Legacy, he was a Mason, 33rd degree Mason. And if you know anything about Mason, you're not supposed to tell any information. You're not supposed to share any of that. Back in the day, you take an oath. That oath was taken not only literally, but it would be carried out. And one of their oaths, if you gave away any information, your neck will be slit from ear to ear, and your tongue will be cut out. So when he wrote the book, and he was a professor at the University of Arkansas at Bluff, he knew his life was in jeopardy. He knew his life in jeopardy by publishing this information at Greek, philosophy, of Southern African history. But anyway, and interesting, when the book came out in 1954, not soon after that did he vanish. He know where he was for a minute, and then when they found him, he was dead. Now, some people say that he was a conspiracy. They killed him because he was a Mason and he told secrets. Some people say that no, he actually died from mysterious illness. Regardless, within the same year that the book Stolen Legacy comes out, he dies. Right? And the book gets shelved. You couldn't even find the book at the university that he taught at the University of Arkansas. So it wasn't until the 1970s, I believe, when Asa Hilliard actually republished the book. But the point is that you have your Carter G. Woodsons and your W.B. Du Bois, who were members of the Boulé, that decided, well, we're going to give y'all hints of it. We ain't going to tell you exactly who. That's its great disservice. So we talked yesterday also about the American Historical Association and how they were founded to basically push the narrative of global white dependency. Why is my thing freezing now? Looks like my thing is freezing. Did this yesterday. Not sure why I'm freezing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit and come back in. Okay. Apologies, y'all. This happened yesterday where this is just the technology where they're going to sometimes you have some hiccups. So let me move to where I was. And then I have to actually upload a couple of one more video that I wanted us to watch before we call it a night. I didn't know it was going to be this long, but it's fine because I want to dissect it. I want to throw a lot at you. I'm going to do this in 2 parts, maybe even 3 parts if necessary, because it's so important. But let me just get here. Yeah. So we talked about this yesterday. Let me just add one more thing here. 1 second. Video file. Come on. Hold tight with me. Appreciate you holding on. And again, if you this is the first time you got in or you've been and you haven't liked the video, and you like what you've heard so far, I really do appreciate you going ahead and liking the videos.
This direction because
and yeah, we're gonna talk about Jesse. We're gonna talk about Jesse. This is the thing when you bringing stuff back up, it plays it right there. It's spoiling what I want to show you. You know what I mean? I don't want you to see this yet, but okay, here's what it is. Yep. All right. So and then I got one more thing I gotta add. One more thing. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Here we go. All right, there we go. All right, so we're back where we were here. Let me go back to here and add that in there. So we talked about yesterday about the American Historical Association and how they basically propaganded the whole agenda of white dependency or quote unquote superiority through their educational system, creating 12,000 historians and then populating them throughout the university sector, which then trickled down into the high school public school system down into, in as low as kindergarten. So now we have white folks that are professing the white lie, basically, and that black people didn't contribute, as to Arnold Toynbee's point of putting out the lie that we didn't contribute anything to the world. So how do they do this? Again, with strategy and agitation propaganda. This night, the African race. I'm a lover of acronyms. So POATUS I call that. That means that people of African descent in the United States. And I say that because if, there's a bunch of black people here. Now we can call ourselves Moors. We can call ourselves whatever you want to call yourself. But they see us as black people, no matter what. They don't care what we want to call ourselves. But the bottom line is you're of African descent. Some of us say we're not from Africa. That's fine. We're not going to get in that debate here. I disagree. But, because if you go back to the origin, the oldest bones are from Africa. So whatever you want to call it, that's fine. Get out of your emotions. We're all black people. We all got thick noses, kinky hair, melanin. All right. So whether you're from the Caribbean, whether you're from the continent, whether you're from, born here, we are people of African descent in the United States. So they had to put this agenda out there to make people Sister Ami said, she said that Woodson has the Boulé look. He sure does. Well, he had a complexion for the protection, he had the complexion for the protection. He had the conked hair. I don't know if it was conked. I think his hair was a little bit straight. So you had that high yellow, and nothing against people, our people, we come in different shades, but they had the brown paper bag test. If you know anything about sororities, we'll talk about that in another episode where we talk about the brown paper bag test and getting in fraternities and sororities where if you were too dark, you couldn't be a member. But that's another whole conversation. But with agitation propaganda, we see here that the crabs in the barrel theory had to be created to make people not believe in themselves, that get whatever you can for yourself, and that not doing things collectively. The whole theory of Ubuntu, of I am because we are, was not going to sit well. They had to make sure that we don't think about doing things collectively. Get yours, you know what I mean, and let everybody else fend for themselves. Then put in the moniker that how we see ourselves. We see ourselves as shiftless, mindless, that we're allegedly lazy, etc. When the most laziest people in the history of the planet were white folk. In fact, even when white folk were slaves, they were the worst slaves. That's why they didn't use their own people. Okay. But the bottom line is that, they had to put this mindset of thinking that we are less than. Then we have the movement called the Lost Cause, which was a reconciliation between the North and the South, recommitting to control and oppress people of African descent. So what does that mean? The American Historical Association was behind the reunification of the North and the South. The South was pissed off at the North because Abraham Lincoln, good old Abe, right? Never, he was honest. No, he wasn't. He freed the slaves that were in rebellion to the Union. What does that mean? That means he only freed the slaves in the South because the Union was the North. And he only did it because they were losing, getting their ass kicked by the South. So what he did was he freed the Africans that were in the South. And then, of course, the South will jump the border and come to the North side. And that's how the North was able to win. Okay. But white folks still had an issue with that. That we see that the North and the South they still had beef. They still had beef. So there was a reconciliation amongst the educators, because if the educators can put out the narrative, then eventually it trickles down into the population and then they'll buy in. So they were like, look, we're going to come together because we still don't like Black people. We want to oppress them just as much as you do. So we're going to put something together here. And this was based upon the belief that slavery was just and moral because it brought economic prosperity. So this is about money. This had everything to do about money, right? And this was the validation to practice of racist power structures during the Jim Crow era in the South. So that's what this was really all about. So we see again William Dunning, and I said James. William Dunning, who started Dunning School. We talked about this yesterday. Again, you can go back and watch it if you want. But there's another guy by the name of J.G. De Ruhlhoek Hamilton, and he was the head of the history department at the University of North Carolina from 1908 to 1930. He promoted the Ku Klux Klan, saved North Carolina from the corrupt and incompetent rule of Black people or people of African descent in the United States. He was nicknamed Ransack Hamilton because of how he plundered plantation documents and rewrote the truth. Right? So he gathered and wrote papers, created the foundation of the Southern Historical Collection, the world's largest repository of Southern historical documents. Again, history is a lie agreed upon. You have this white man that goes in there and tries to change all the stories that you've heard, the true stories, so that you would think that it was actually white people that were the victims and portrayed as that, or that slavery was a good thing because it brought prosperity as far as economics is concerned. So I'll close out with this piece here that, we see that the indoctrination is important. This is when you're indoctrinated and you use education as the way to do it, is basically using the process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically. So you don't challenge it. You choose not to challenge it. So both our story of antiquity and pre, during, and post-emancipation history has been whitewashed. We don't even know what's been happening, right? And so, John Henry Clark said it. To control the people, you must first control what they think about themselves and how they regard their history and culture. And when your younger conqueror makes you ashamed of your culture and your history, he needs no prison walls and no chains to hold you, John Henry Clark. All right. So that was what he had to say in this respect. Now, I really do feel like, I try not to be too long, y'all. We had an hour and 45 minutes, but I'm loving this information. I'm gonna put in the chat here. I'm gonna leave it up to y'all. I have a couple more things because I didn't even get into the Boulé yet. I had to break down the preface of how we got here, right? Now I'm about to get into the organization itself. If you put in the chat here that you want me to continue for at least another half hour, put in the chat and I'll do it. So go ahead and let me know. I'm sitting here. It's you guys give me the green light, and I will continue on. I got some information about Jesse, Martin Luther King, the Boulé itself. Okay, Sister Amida said, yep, keep going. Yep, all right. Brother Gerard saying, let's go. You right. For those that can't hang on, you can come back and you can watch the replay. Right? All right, give thanks. I appreciate that. So let's remove this one and add the next one. All right. Here we go. So again, we talked about the timeline. And it's very important that we see what we're dealing with here. All right, what we're dealing with here. And as I mentioned, you had these, oh gosh, I meant to add that one piece in there. That's okay. All right. So you have emancipated Africans, 1865. Now we're in the early 1900s. Some of us are going to college. Some of us are now, advancing and learning and having the ability to be exposed to worldly things and events. So white folks can't have that. They can't have you thinking for yourself. They can't have you thinking diasporically, more importantly, right? Because we need you here. We need you to be part of our rat race psychosis that we talked about yesterday, right? So in order to do that, we need to get a black face out there to make you think, hey, you should stay here. Be proud of what's here, right? So we created the black version of Skull and Bones, Henry Minton. Again, he wanted to create an organization that was based upon the tenets of Skull and Bones. Now, mind you, don't think that a black man can just say, I want to be like y'all and do it without you. You're going to use my name. You're going to definitely get my influence. All right. So that's basically what happened is Skull and Bones took them under, their wing. Right. And we find here the founders of the black version of Skull and Bones, the Boulé, aka Sigma Pi Phi. Founders are Henry and Minton, as we mentioned, the founder, Algernon Bashir Jackson, who is also a doctor. All these are doctors. Edwin Clarence Howard, Richard John Warwick, Eugene T. Henson, and Robert Jones Abele. So these are the 6 men who founded the Boulé. Today, the Boulé consists of 126 chapters. They have a hard stop at 5,000 members. And collectively, all members and chapters throughout the United States and West Indies make up the wealthiest group of black men on the planet. Okay, so these are some of their most known folks. Yeah, good old Bill Cosby's part of the Boulé, always been. Again, you got to be a member. You got to be at least 45. You have to be in a fraternity. You have to have pledged. Douglas Wilder, who was in government. John Johnson, he passed, but he was the owner of Ebony and Jet. Carter G. Woodson, Martin Luther King was also part of it. Now, what fraternity? I'm not sure. Still don't know what fraternity he was in. I think he could also have been honorary. Earl Graves, also, he was Black Enterprise, and good old Messy Jesse. Good old Messy Jesse, right? So we're going to talk about some of these folks tonight. Now, let me blow this up because this is let's get into Messy Jesse right now. So let me play this clip first. And then, how I want to do this. Yeah. So let me lay it out for you first. So Jesse was in the Boulé. Jesse is also a part of Omega Sci-Fi. He was a Q. And Martin Luther King, he's an alpha. I don't know if he actually is an honorary alpha or not. I think he was an honorary alpha. I don't know what chapter. I can't remember what chapter he was in. But nevertheless, Jesse and Martin had a interesting relationship. Martin never trusted Jesse. Jesse came on the scene. Jesse was a gangster, they say. They said he was hood. He's from Chicago. He was very, obnoxious and, brash, and he would have his thugs with him, and he tried to, basically take over the civil rights movement. He would show up in a room and people would kind of like, feel uncomfortable around him. So what we find is that when Martin Luther King was assassinated, Jesse had a role in that death. Okay, the setup of it as well. Steve Coakley talked about it a lot. If you go to YouTube and you look up Steve Coakley, Jesse Jackson, you'll get a lecture that he talked about the role that Jesse Jackson played. And I'm going to give you a preface, a little synopsis of what it is. It's in detail in my book as well. But basically, Jesse was trying to replace Martin. He was being groomed to. It wasn't just his own aspirations. He was being groomed to be that, the replacement. And Jesse, his good friend was Ralph Abernathy, who was also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. He would always tell him, look, I don't trust that dude. There's something about him. I don't really feel him. But nevertheless, he let him get close. Let him get close to him. So when we go to, April 4th, when he was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel, we find that it was Jesse. The day before he was assassinated, his room was on the ground floor. There was 2 levels. And on the day before he was assassinated, he was on the ground floor. So Jesse goes and petitions for him to get a room on the 2nd floor, room 306, for the next day. So the next day, there was a rehearsal, and then he was shot on the next day. So the next day, they did a rehearsal where they were all on the balcony. And this is why you might see the infamous picture of Jesse, Ralph Abernathy, Andrew Young, and Martin on the standing there smiling on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. They're about to go to dinner. This was actually a practice run for how he was going to get shot or killed. So the next day, we find that Jesse, as you see in this picture here, this is exactly what he was wearing the day that Martin got killed. And you always realize, if you look at pictures of Martin, he was always in a suit and tie, shirt and tie at least. Always wore a shirt and tie, even at dinner. They just made a point. So there's the notion that Steve Coakley put out that it was word that Jesse had received information or orders by the Memphis police that they were supposed, anyone that was in a shirt and tie would be shot. So friendlies were not to wear a necktie, right? So hence Jesse shows up in a turtleneck, and when he shows up in a turtleneck, Martin even gets on him about it, like, yo, how come you don't have a shirt and tie on? He's like, I don't know, we just going to dinner. What's the big deal? Blah, 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 right? He's making a big deal. He's thinking he's making a big deal about it. But in actuality, he wanted to stand out to make sure that he didn't get shot because he knew it was going down. And sure enough, Martin gets assassinated that day. And Martin allegedly isn't even there. He's nowhere to be found. Now he comes out and says that he was right there having a conversation with Martin looking down the balcony, but he wasn't even near. He was on the ground floor, and Martin was on the 2nd floor where he was in direct shot of a policeman allegedly. Now, this is what's said now behind closed doors, is that there was a policeman that shot him from the ground level up, not from where they have the infamous picture of them pointing over to this area over here. The shooter was actually on the ground level, and they said it was a policeman. But check this clip out and I'm going to give you some context after this of what happened after he was shot.
This direction because he was standing at an acute angle, and the bullet knocked him up off of his feet in that direction against that ledger over there. And it knocked him off his feet. and we turned around immediately.
Can I pause it right there? He said the shot pushed him up, not over, but up. So that means the force came from under, if you think about it, right?
And it knocked him off of his feet. And we turned around immediately because we didn't know how many bullets were coming. But we turned around looking, and we were looking to see where it come from because you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell it was a shot.
You didn't hear a shot?
No, until it hit his face. It sounded like a stick of dynamite or a large firecracker. And when we turned, all we could see was police coming. Police were coming from the direction of the shot.
You hear what he said? The police were coming from the direction of the shot. Did he just not tell you who shot him? If he says that the police are coming from the direction of the shot, if the shooter was near the policeman, they should have got the shooter right there. Why are they coming from the direction of the shot? He's telling you right there who shot him.
I said, Dr. King. That was it. I said, Dr. King. Just as he straightened up, he said, Dr. King. And the bullet exploded in his face. And evidently it came from...
Well, you see how they cut it off? It came from, and then they cut it off. Okay, so this is just, I found this footage last night. I didn't even know this was out there. So this is telling, because now he's telling you, yo, like they shot this dude from, he went off his feet. And, you know, the shot came from the direction that the police were coming from. How could the police get there so quickly? Why were there so many police there that someone just come straight out and just shoot him? Like, come on, y'all. Like, we're not stupid, right? So here's the more compelling story that people don't know about what Jesse did. So a lot of people in Martin's entourage weren't feeling Jesse. They didn't like him. Oh, let me read this thing here. I meant to read this. This is a reply that someone said that I found. Jesse Louis Burns, aka Jesse Jackson, you know that the shot came from below. That way, as you stated, the bullet knocked him off his feet, and you were not on the balcony when he was shot. You were on the ground level where the shot came from by a man in a county sheriff uniform with a high-powered rifle. It's quite interesting in this video that Jesse being interviewed, but the last not that is heard on the videos is Billy Kyle, Reverend Samuel Billy Kyle, the other person that is accused of setting up Reverend Martin Luther King. Yeah, there's a video about him too where he talks about how you know, he was involved. Well, he told on himself. He spoke too much. He spoke freely and told on himself about the involvement. But here's the thing that Jesse did, because not a lot of people liked him, that when the ambulances came to pick him up to take him to the hospital, everybody was getting in cars to go to the hospital, and no one would give Jesse a ride. No one would give Jesse a ride, right? So he's sitting there like, you know, damn, you know, I can't even get a ride to the hospital. So, you know, what am I going to do, right? So they told him, well, you know, make sure that you stay behind. I mean, they said, make sure you don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anybody about what happened, right? So this is Jesse telling everybody, don't say nothing to nobody. Don't say nothing. Don't talk to the media, right? So Andrew Young, eventual mayor of Atlanta, he's in a car and he's driving away, and he looks back and he sees Jesse Jackson talking to reporters through a fence. He's doing the very same thing he told y'all not to do. He's doing it, right? So he's in there, and this is that interview I just aired. I showed you, right? So after that happened, what did Jesse do? Messy Jesse gets on a plane and flies to New York. He has his I don't know what they call him. He has his assistant or whatever, promotional assistants or whatever, that got him a gig to talk on the Today Show the very next morning. Before he did that, though, when Martin was laying on the ground, Jesse Jackson comes out of nowhere, climbs up the stairs, goes up to the balcony, puts his hands in the blood, and then puts it on the shirt. Andrew Young talked about it. He said, we don't know what the hell was this dude doing. Why is he putting blood on his shirt? Like, what the hell is, he was literally anointing himself. And this is how it happened. So he put the blood on his shirt. He's now talking to the press about what happened. He tells you where the shot came from, where the police were, right? Why didn't the police arrest the person that was right there, standing right next to them, basically? And then he gets on a plane, hops a plane, and flies to New York City. Next morning, he's on the Today Show talking about what happened, and he shows up wearing the same shirt with the blood on it, right? He's wearing, so at some point, he had to taken it off. I mean, who sleeps in a bloody shirt, right? So whether even if he did or not, the point is that he put the same shirt on the next day, shows up in the New York studio to talk about the death, and he's wearing blood on the shirt, as if to say that I am the anointed one. I am the next in line. I'm the one that's going to take over the movement, pick up the mantle, so to speak, right? Mind you, he told everybody, don't say nothing to nobody, don't talk to no press. And the next morning, he's out there, or that night, he's out there, blah, 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 because he wants to be the one that's going to control the narrative. So allegedly, the Boulé, members in the Boulé, those that were alphas and those that were Qs had beef. Because they were like, man, Jesse, what was his role? You know what I'm saying? And it still haven't been talked to. Now, Jesse has faded away. I know he has some debilitating health issues now, but Jesse was rewarded for what he did, right? Didn't he run for president? At least once, maybe twice. He had the Push Foundation. He had, and interesting enough, when I say Push Foundation, I got to go back because I just want to make sure I'm saying this right because I always mess it up. But the Push Foundation was also one of Rockefeller's organizations. So the Push Foundation was founded in 1922 by John D. Rockefeller. And then what did Jesse come out with? Rainbow Push, right? Synonymous? Is it coincidental? I don't think so. There's no such thing as coincidence when you do a history. All right. We got to get that out the window. These things happen for a reason. All right. They're calculated. And sometimes in their gloating, or even if they make a mistake, they'll give you a jewel. Right. Yes, we have many moles and snitches amongst us. I think Jesse and Reverend Sharpton are, yes, not just them. There are several others, but yep, Al Sharpton as well. Right. There's a conversation I had with Steve Coakley years ago. We talked about how Dick Gregory, not that he's a snitch, but Dick Gregory knew about stuff about the Boulé, and he said, I'm not going to tell you because he feared his life. So I get it. Some people were just, they didn't want to disclose what they knew. But this is, what Jesse did, right? Messy Jesse. But here again, we talk about the building of Sigma Pi Phi. The building of this organization's plan reliance was placed upon Greek and historical tradition. The reasons of this action are not difficult to discover, for it is well known that the study of the Greek civilization was basically an acquaintance with Western civilization, although Greek culture had relationships with the culture of the Orient. Okay, this is what is in the history book of Sigma Pi Phi, First of the Negro Greek Letter Fraternities, page 38. So they're telling you that this Black organization is all about Greek history and tradition. We're not about Black people and Black history. We're about those Greeks. All right. And the roundtable, Charles H. Wesley said, who wrote the history book for Alpha Phi Alpha and wrote the history book for the Boulé, said that the roundtable lives only a poetic life of history. They can live again in life, and we can make them live through us. It can continue as a dream, and it can continue through us. So you have these Black men that are thinking, we're going to create a Black organization, and we're going to surrounded around the philosophies and doings of white people that have done black people wrong historically. It just is asinine and crazy that that's what their mentality is. But it's important to make this note because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a thumbnail in this because we're at the 2-hour mark and I don't want to be too long-winded. We're going to pick this up because it's Boulé History Month. We're going to pick this up in the next week's one of our episodes next week. We'll add on to it. But the point I want to make to you is understanding that even with the roundtable group, let me just bring that up again. The roundtable group is interesting, is that you can't post comments in certain destination. Oh, no, I'm sorry. When it was all stolen from Egypt. Exactly, Sister Kendra. Exactly. So what we're seeing here is the roundtable group. Who's the roundtable group? So Knights Templar. Now we're talking about Illuminati, Knights Templar, Knights of the Round Table. You have black men who are speaking about these types of eras and people where they're letting you know that they have been conditioned with a whitewashed mind. They have no interest at all in being African, no interest at all in trying to do well for black people. It's all about them trying to be the best version of Sambos that they can. And we're going to find in the next week when we do our continuation of this topic, that we're going to see that they've done some historically some diabolical things. There's a question here by Brother Gerard. Please say Asa Hilliard is not a member of the. Sorry, bro. Asa Hilliard was a member. Yeah, that hurts because Asa Hilliard was a historical giant. I will share next week with my with everyone my experience with his family because I've been writing about the Boulé since 1997. I had a 6-part series on my website, The Ghetto Times, that was there for 20 some odd years. And I also have the full list of all the members up until 1994 online. If you go there now, theghettotimes.com, look up Boulé, you'll see the list of all the members. And in these names, you'll find some people that you are familiar with. But I had some encounters with people that, wanted to keep things on the low, or people that came to some of the people that were members in their defense. I even had an encounter with Asa Hilliard about it. And I'll talk about that next week. But the point is that we are at a space now that, if they're going to take time for the month of May to rededicate themselves to their co-conspiracies of keeping black people at a snail-pace level of progression towards liberation, so should we. So should we study them. We should know what they're about and what their doings are so that we can then counter. Again, this is all about reverse engineering. Part of Ways to Freedom is to figure out who's been stopping you from that freedom and figuring out the most tactical way to stop this cyclical spiraling down of, delayed experience of pursuit of life, happiness, and all those things that we should be having here. We should not have to be fighting just to have an experience in this world. And there are people who wish us not to have that. So it's very important that we think about where we stand. And it's not just about you personally, but it's about people that you're around, surrounding you. When we look at us collectively in our neighborhoods, why are we still in this position where we are having less than and feeling like we can do nothing about it? That's why it's very important that we understand the importance of history so that we know where we've come from, know who we've been dealing with, so we can understand moving forward that these things might happen. So in closing, I ask that you help us grow this YouTube channel. If you haven't by now, or if you're watching it later on, please subscribe so that you will get notifications of episodes that are coming. We got another episode tomorrow. It's going to be really dope. I'm going to talk about the beginning stages of this is a spiritual piece. I'm going through training myself to take an experience in ayahuasca. So I've been doing some shrooms, and I'm going to tell you why I'm doing these things before I actually get into the experience of taking these plant medicines and the importance of that. So that's going to be a pretty interesting topic, I'm thinking. But you can subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you will get notified when they come. And you can do that at WTF Pod Show on YouTube. You can also follow us on Instagram at the WTF Podcast Show, and also me at Ishangi, and on Facebook, WTF Podcast Show. You can follow us as there. The content will be there as well. You can visit two of my websites, the CryptoWealthMovement.com and the GhettoTimes.com. Crypto Wealth Movement is a financial sustainability movement where we're talking about building finances to live off your savings and investments. And the Ghetto Times is we're in my archives. It's in our 31st year. This was I think I'm proclaiming it as the very first African-centered conscious website put out in 1995. Going on 30 years ago, that website was put out. So we have over 500 articles, including the stuff about the Boulé, that is there. If you find what you found tonight was helpful, you found that you learned something from it, I really do welcome you to, if you're interested, you can purchase the book, Who's the Boulé, at the Ghetto Times. It's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. For those on the go that don't have time to flip the pages, you can turn on the audiobook and hear this information. And also, if you feel compelled, what you heard tonight moves you, that you want to make a donation, any amount, $1, $1,000, whatever you feel that is in your heart to help, it goes towards the maintenance of this channel, keeping me able to do the work and diligence to drop more episodes. Feel free to at PayPal me.me.dgtimes, or you can also contribute at where's the other one? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it. Here we go. You can also send it to Cash App at Bit Marley. Okay. So yeah, I hope that you felt tonight was fruitful. Brother Gerard says, Aseo, absolute. Johnny Taylor, gratitude, absolute gratitude to you all for tuning in. I really do thank you for doing that. He's hanging in with me at 11 o'clock on Wednesday night. I really do appreciate that. You could be sleeping. And yeah, Gerard, we're going to go in about ayahuasca. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And in the end here, I'm hoping that you all found tonight was fruitful. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for episode 3. So stay tight, stay focused, understand that we are in the space of learning, and this is all about bettering ourselves, being around common folk to share these type of things, and let's continue to challenge ourselves, if not just for ourselves, for our bloodlines. All right. So I'm giving thanks for you all for coming in. Sister Phyllis, good to see you. Yes. RBG all the way, every day, all dizzy. And so, yes, I will see you all tomorrow. Bless up. Whoops. Did my clock.